James Mackay grew up in Scotland, and he was encouraged by his dad to pursue a career in business, but not the family business. Instead, he earned a PhD in genetics and began a long stint with AstraZeneca, eventually jumping across the pond and then all the way to San Diego. He continued with A companies like Ardea and now Arthrosi and Aristea, where he's even done a deal with Arena. In this episode of the Health Biz podcast, James talks about how he and his team at Aristea are applying their decades of experience to develop a drug they licensed from AstraZeneca. The first indication is PPP. No, it's not purchase power parity or the Paycheck Protection Program, but rather palmoplantar pustulosis, a nasty illness with no good treatments today. We talk about why good drugs get left on the shelf at Big Pharma and the future of the biotech industry and of San Diego. I'm David Williams, host of the Health Biz podcast and president of Health Business Group, a strategy consulting firm that helps healthcare and life sciences companies develop robust growth plans. Reach out to me, dwilliams@healthbusinessgroup.com, if you'd like to discuss strategy for your company. And finally, please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. Thanks. Well, James Mackay, President and CEO of Aristea Therapeutics, welcome to the Health Biz podcast.
Thank you, David. Good to be here.
We're going to talk all about what your current company is doing, but before we do that, I want to understand kind of where you're coming from, both physically and metaphorically. So, what was your childhood like? Where was it, and any particular influences that stuck with you?
Yeah, sure. So you can probably tell from my accent, David, that I'm from Scotland. I was actually born in a little fishing village up on the northeast of Scotland called Bucky, looking right out over the North Sea. I had a great childhood. I'm the eldest of four children. My father was a businessman, had a big influence on me. I watched how he ran his business, and he really taught me to care about the people that you work with. He sadly passed away 11 years ago, so he never actually saw me start my own company. He would have been very proud of that, to see that taking place. And I think one of the most important things that he did for me is that he told me that he didn't want me to take over the family business, which was a little bit of a surprise to me at the time, because I would have been the fourth generation to run the business. And I didn't really understand it at the time. But I realize now that what he was doing, first of all, I subsequently realized that the business was actually failing, so he didn't want me to step into it. But more importantly than that, he actually wanted me to broaden my horizons, get out of the small town and, go and explore. So I think, that was clearly one of the biggest influences he had. And I think if he could see me here in San Diego now, he'd be very happy that his advice was well heeded.
That's good. Now, it sounds like, you're being modest about about your upbringings, because although maybe people haven't heard of Bucky, is that where the Bucky balls are from?
Oh, I have no idea what that is, so yeah. I don't think so.
No, okay. It's a carbon compressed cluster, I think, of 60 atoms. It's
No, okay, no, I don't think so.
Yeah, okay. Well, I didn't think so either. But anyway, maybe not. Maybe the town should be getting a royalty though, if they have anything. Now,
yeah, maybe.
It sounds interesting. Now I have to, I kind of like to recognize patterns as well. And I saw once you went from the B from your town, then it was sort of like up the alphabet, and clearly it's Aristea now. But you seem to have a fondness for the AR companies. I think Ardea, Arthrosi, maybe even something in Arena. Maybe AstraZeneca is like the one that's the sort of the exception to the rule. What's with all the A companies?
I think it's pharmaceutical companies are normally named with an A because it means it's at the start of the alphabet.
Yeah.
So trying to find a name with an A that's not already been taken is always a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah, and what I'm being a little bit facetious here, and don't worry, the whole interview won't be with these sort of strange questions. But the before Aristea, Ardea, Arthrosi, what are these other ones, and what's sort of the through line, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in the pharmaceutical industry for nearly 30 years now. Worked actually for AstraZeneca for nearly 30 years, various different roles. When I left AstraZeneca 3.5 years ago, decided to set up Aristea Therapeutics. And the Arthrosi. I'm on the board of Arthrosi. There are some ex-colleagues of mine at another A company, Ardea Biosciences,
Yeah.
that I was the CEO as well. So it's a very tight knit community here in San Diego, and we keep on working with each other again and again.
No, that's a good thing, obviously. So, so Aristea Therapeutics. Let's talk about that and where it came from, and certainly, the idea of exciting idea about starting the company. So, besides wanting to get up toward the top of the alphabet, why that name, and what does it symbolize in terms of what work you're doing there?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. So, as I said, I've been in the pharmaceutical industry 30 years, had a great career at AstraZeneca. And, to be honest, I couldn't be doing what I'm doing now if I'd not had that fantastic training and experiences over that period of time with AstraZeneca. I decided, 3.5 years ago, it was time for me to set up my own company. I'd spent the previous 5 years actually running another biotech here in San Diego, Ardea Biosciences, which was a wholly owned subsidiary of AstraZeneca. In fact, I led the AstraZeneca team that actually acquired that organization back in 2012. So I'd been working in the biotech side of the business rather than in the big pharma for 5 years prior to setting up Aristea Therapeutics, and it was a natural extension for me just to when I left AstraZeneca to set up my own company. Aristea, the name Aristea is interesting. I wish we'd when we selected the name, we initially as a team we liked the name Arista. But when we Googled it, we found that there were hundreds of companies
Yeah,
with that name. And then one of the team said, well, why don't we just put an E in it and
yeah,
make it Aristea? And that was a really cool idea because we then found out when we Googled Aristea that Aristea is a female Greek goddess that means the best of everything,
nice.
which is great. And the Urban Dictionary definition of Aristea is perfection and ultimate coolness. So we have a really nice name with a really nice background. And you may have seen on our website we have this sort of cat or cheetah on the website, and the whole idea of the cheetah is focus on the end goal, which of course is taking drugs through to approval and to patients, and then speed of execution. We're trying to capture that with the focus of the cheetah on the prey, and then the speed with which it moves forward. So
Very
that's the
nice.
that's the background to the Aristea name.
Well, it's good. If it were all about the name and the symbolism, I think you'd be all set now, and you wouldn't have to bother with the difficult job of drug development. I remember actually when I was graduating from college and I was doing some interviews, and I was interested in consulting, but I thought I'd interviewed some investment banks as well. And one of the questions they asked was, like what animal would you compare yourself with? And they didn't want to hear like tortoise or something like that, and so they were looking to see, did they have this person like have the killer instinct? So say, so I told them
Mm-hmm.
I was like a cheetah, and I would go and I see something I wanted, I'd go and like rip its head off, and they were like, well, we want aggressive, but I don't know, that's maybe one step further. So anyway, the cheetah is a good one. I did see that. I thought also that I think the Aristea is also, I think there's a plant like a
There is.
flowering plant. Yeah.
Correct. It's a plant that's I actually have two of them in my backyard
Nice.
that my wife got for me when we set the company up. It's actually a plant that comes from South Africa
Uh-huh.
and actually grows after there's been a fire. So it's one of the first plants that grows out of the sort of ashes of the fire. So yeah, my wife got me two of those, and they're growing nicely in the backyard.
That's good. I think there's actually a lot of South Africans in San Diego because the weather is actually somewhat similar. So that
Yeah.
doesn't surprise me if the plants grow nicely there as well. Excellent. Well, it sounds like beyond kind of getting the team together and getting the idea on paper and the name, you're actually at a clinical stage, which is exciting. So interested to hear about kind of what it is that you're focusing on, and why you're going, why that particular molecule, and what indication you're going after?
Yeah, sure. Happy to, David. So we're a clinical stage, as you've said, immunology focused drug development company. We're really focused on developing treatments for rare and serious inflammatory disorders. We licensed our lead molecule, RIST-4721. It's a CXCR2 antagonist. It works by stopping the neutrophils in your body trafficking from the bone marrow to the site of inflammation. And the molecule originally was invented by AstraZeneca. So it was a molecule that I was familiar with from my time at AstraZeneca, had originally been developed for respiratory indications. And a number of years ago, AstraZeneca decided to stop development of that particular target in respiratory. And the molecule basically got put up on the shelf. I'd always liked the molecule, I really liked the profile of it. So when the opportunity came along to start Aristea Therapeutics, that was my first port of call, and we licensed the molecule from AstraZeneca. But what we did is we went right back to the basics of the science, and said, look, we know what this drug does. It actually stops these neutrophils moving to the site of inflammation. Now, what we need to do is to actually find a disease or indication where we believe the drug will actually be effective. So we really started searching for neutrophil-mediated diseases, and we actually identified neutrophilic dermatoses as a group of diseases. And then together with certain dermatology physicians, we identified palmoplantar pustulosis, or more easily pronounced PPP, as one of the more common but still rare neutrophilic dermatoses, where there was really good evidence that the neutrophils played a key role in this disease. It's a very nasty disease. It's a flaring disease, so the patients get it's maybe 6 to 8 flares a year. And when they get a flare, basically they get these crops of sterile neutrophil-filled pustules on the palms of the hands and the soles of the feet, nowhere else in the body. And what happens is that there's a lot of inflammation associated with that, and then the pustules break open, the skin cracks, and so it becomes extremely painful and debilitating for the patients. And what happens is that before the flare is over and the skin can heal, the patients actually get another flare on top of the damage that's already been done on the skin. And basically they get this flare upon flare upon flare, and the skin just continues to get really inflamed, really cracked open. And, it's very debilitating. People can't really work with their hands. If it's on your feet, then a lot of the patients actually can't walk. There are no approved treatments for the disease in either the US or Europe. About 175,000 people in the US suffer from the disease. And it's primarily postmenopausal women who have been or are current cigarette smokers. The exact link to the cigarette smoking is not known, but overall, if you look at the epidemiology, there's 85 to 90% plus of these patients have been cigarette smokers.
Wow. So, when you talk about, people use the term unmet medical need a lot, but you're clear this is a very good, example of it. And I guess that, PPP is an easier way to remember it. Of course, until a year ago, that would have been the purchasing power parity, and now it's paycheck protection program. So you got a few winners there. I want to ask you a broader question about this, what you described, and how you got a hold of this molecule. My understanding is obviously the big pharma has a lot of different molecules that they discover and go through some degree of development. And then for various reasons, either it doesn't work, or a particular indication, or someone loses interest, or the trial is designed wrong, or whatever may happen, and things get put on the shelf. And a lot of times my understanding, they don't come off the shelf because it's either it has a bad reputation in the company, people are onto something else, and they don't necessarily want to out-license it. It's not a big priority. And it may take somebody like you that's had the decades of trust built up within the company to know how to do it. I mean, is it your sense that there are a lot of kind of unrealized assets like this within big pharma, or what's your sense of it?
Yeah, no, absolutely, David. And you raise what is, I think, a a real challenge for biotechs in being able to identify these assets. Because what happens in a big pharma, of course, as you said, that they have a whole portfolio full of projects, and decisions are made at various different times for different reasons, to stop the development of a particular type of molecule. And then what happens in big pharma is that everybody, of course, who worked on that molecule is immediately moved on to another project. And basically, the molecule is left without a home, put up on the shelf, and really often, and unless you are aware at the time that that's actually taken place, that sort of knowledge really is not available publicly for people to access. I was obviously aware of the molecule, so I was able to go back in and ask AstraZeneca if they were willing to license it out. Some companies, including AstraZeneca, do have what are called sort of open innovation websites, where they do actually post some molecules that are available for researchers to actually take and conduct research that AstraZeneca approves them to do. So there are some molecules that are available those ways, but you're right, there are a lot of molecules that are just sitting up on the shelf and basically nobody knows about them. I think the other challenge from a business development perspective for large organizations is that the business development people are normally focused on bringing innovation into the company, rather than licensing it out. And the problem about licensing it out is, they have to go through all the negotiation, pay the lawyers' fees for the licensing. And, they get very little at the beginning of that deal, because, biotech, can't pay large sums of money to get these molecules. So I think at the end of the day, the business development people often don't have the incentive. It costs money to do this. They're not bringing necessarily anything into the company. And then I think as well, if the molecule, there's only two outcomes once you've licensed the molecule. Either the molecule fails, in which case, it can be said that, that you wasted your time out licensing it, or the molecule's successful. And then what tends to happen is that, people ask the business development people, well, why on earth did you give that molecule away? Why didn't we keep it in-house? So it's like a no-win situation for them. But, some companies are trying to address this by these open innovation websites. And I think AstraZeneca's, one of the ones at the forefront of that.
Well, that's good. I think it's really important. I mean, as we've seen, for example, with COVID, where there's an attempt to go and try things that have been used for other reasons. It would be good if there's generally available sort of a library of possibilities, and there are all those problems that you talked about in terms of knowledge, incentives, and so on. So, well, good.
And I think as well from a small biotech perspective is we can breathe new life into these molecules, because a big company like AstraZeneca would never have developed the drug for PPP. It's just not in their area of focus. Whereas for a small company, we can take that, develop it for that disease, get it to the patients, and really do some good.
So, I hadn't heard of this PPP before, but as you say, it's actually affects a fairly large number of people, and it's also pretty severe. So that sounds like a good one. Now, I'm guessing that are you planning then to look at other indications for the same molecule? Is that the next step, or other molecules? What comes next?
Yeah, so we're continuing with the PPP development because we completed a phase 2A study. We saw nice activity of the molecule in the disease, particularly in patients who were actively flaring as they were coming into the trial. So we're now moving to do a large phase 2B dose ranging study, and we're also expanding into some other indications. So we're going to move into 2 rheumatology indications where, again, there's good scientific evidence that neutrophils play a key role. We're going to do a proof of concept study in familial Mediterranean fever, and one in Behçet's disease. And we recently, last month, signed a collaboration agreement with Arena Pharmaceuticals. That's another pharmaceutical company here in San Diego. And as a result of that, we're going to expand the number of indications by another 2. So we're going to do a study in another inflammatory skin condition called hidradenitis suppurativa, and Arena are actually going to do a study in inflammatory bowel disease. So we will have, at the beginning of next year, we will have 5 parallel indications for the molecule. So we're going to be busy. It's an exciting time.
No, that's good. Now, you're starting to get into the expensive phases as well. And I saw that you've recently raised a round, a big one. It's 123 million, which of course makes me wonder whether it's 123,456,789 or something like that. So it goes 1 through 9. But any magic about that number, or the big number?
Yeah, so in terms of fundraising, so when we initially started up the company, our sort of founding funder was Novo Ventures. That was a relatively small $15 million Series A back in 2018, and that allowed us to do the proof of concept study. The latest round was led by Fidelity. And was a $63 million round, which is the money that we need in order to progress the PPP, FMF, and Behçet's disease program. And then we brought in an additional $60 million as a result of the Arena deal, which brought it to 123 million. That'll give us runway to deliver, the 5 indications that I've talked about to the next stage of development, and to fund the company for basically the next 3 years or so. And then, obviously after that, we'll be looking to raise more money.
Good. But it sounds like the environment is pretty good. We have something that has some potential in some of the early proof, and a strong leadership team. At least the funds are available to develop it further.
Yeah, and I think you identified there the experience of the leadership team. I think that's one of the key things, in addition to obviously the scientific rationale that the investors look for. And from an Aristea perspective, we've got a great deal of drug development experience. We're a small team. There were originally 4 of us. We've just doubled in size over the last few months. To 8. We've got a lot of drug development experience between us, and we've actually taken 9 drugs through to approval between us in our careers. So I think that's one of the important things that the investors look for, to see that you're going to actually be able to really design the drug development in the right way to answer the questions that are necessary in order to take the drug through to approval.
It's of course always important to have experience, but I do see some contrasts in companies, but I also think just even in the areas of development. So if you look recently and you see these gene therapy trials have had a lot of challenges with them, and partly because it's new technology and people don't understand what happens with safety and so on. But also I think a lot of the people that are working in these companies, they're coming out of academia, because there hasn't been, AstraZeneca hadn't been developing, to give your companies as an example, they haven't been developing gene therapies for the past 20, 30 years. So there's nobody that has 30 years of experience with gene therapy. And my personal view is that some of the risk associated with the new technologies is because the people that are developing them actually don't have a track record of doing development. And those that have developed something else, they haven't developed gene therapy either. And I think maybe that gets underappreciated. Maybe it's being appreciated now, but I don't think it was appreciated at the time.
No, I think you're absolutely right, David. I think, as these new technologies come out, particularly the people that are working on them may be very experienced in those particular technologies, but they've never applied them into drug development. And I think it's the way of designing and conducting the clinical trials that, you learn over the years or decades of, developing other drugs and frankly learning from the conduct of those clinical trials about how to design them, how to conduct them, how to interpret the data coming out of them. So I think you're absolutely right.
So where do you see things going, over the next, let's say 5, even 10 years, if you want to look out that far, and say, in the areas where Aristea is working and maybe kind of related companies and maybe the whole San Diego ecosystem? And where where are things headed? There's all these exciting new technologies. There's certainly plenty of patient needs. There are issues raised about pricing, certainly, which my opinion is actually not just a drug company issue, but others that are involved in that as well. What do you see as being the environment, and where are things going?
Yeah, so I mean, it's always an exciting time in the innovation space, and I think we're going to continue to see more and more biotech innovation, going to big pharma. You're seeing a lot of pharma, scaling back their innovation internally and actually looking externally to these smaller biotechs to bring that innovation in. I think that's a trend that we're going to continue to see. I think the other thing that's interesting and is definitely going to change is that we are seeing a blurring of the industry verticals. So, historically, life science or biotech was just completely separate from technology. And you're actually seeing those industry verticals blurring now and seeing, technology coming into the conduct of clinical trials, the ability to real-time monitor patients by, wearables like we all wear nowadays. There's some fascinating work going on at UCSD here, University of California, San Diego, with tattoos that can be put on the skin, and things can be delivered through the tattoos, the tattoos can actually monitor what's going on in the body. And I think we're going to continue to see that happening. And you mentioned 10 years time. Will we be delivering drugs as a little white tablet in 10 years time? My guess is probably not. We're probably going to be delivering them through these wearables, and the wearable's going to, be able to tell the doctor that the dose of the drug has been administered. It's then going to be able to measure the response of the drug. It'll be able to continually, monitor your heart rate, your respiration rate, and so on, and just feed that back. And if for some reason somebody doesn't take the drug, it's probably going to send an alert to the doctor to say, this patient didn't take the drug today. So I think the whole industry is going to really be transformed over that period of time. And I think being here in San Diego, for me, is one of the best places to be. We have a tremendous innovation ecosystem here across both life science and tech. And we see a lot of cross-fertilization here between those industry verticals. So it's an exciting place to be, an exciting time, and the innovation seems to come so fast nowadays.
It's interesting what you say about on the drug development side incorporating more technology, and I think also some of the ethos of moving fast as technology companies do in development. And that was highlighted partly by the recent vaccine success on the mRNA side and just how fast that actually happened. I do think there's a little bit that goes the other way too, from the kind of more deliberate way of doing development and moving it into the tech industry. And you see that because I think as we become more dependent on software and hardware, you have to develop it a little bit better than, let's say, Microsoft did, or you'll fix it, it'll have bugs and you'll deal with patches or whatever. When you're using it to drive a car, or when there's so many, cyber attackers out there, you see even with the recent, Apple 0 day, 0 click exploit, it has real implications. And so you actually have some of the deliberation and being careful, like you're dealing with a patient, that happens in drug development, I think come over to the tech field a little bit too, even if they're not quite ready to embrace it. It is cross-fertilization. It's not just one way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The other area that I think, I'm not sure we've really got our heads around this yet, is what is artificial intelligence going to do to the way that we develop drugs? I have no doubt that it's going to be a disruptor in a positive way. Exactly what that means, I have no idea at this point in time, but it's there and it's starting to be used. So I think, again, we'll see some exciting and positive disruption of the industry as a result of that.
Yeah, good. Well, it'll be a good reason to keep doing podcasting and keep looking for the next thing. Let me ask you if you have had a chance to read any books recently, and any books you would recommend, or any books that you recommend we stay away from.
Yeah, sure. So a couple. I don't read a lot of business management books. I
That's
mean, I
fine.
spend most of my day reading all the time. At the office. So I normally listen to music when I'm relaxing. But there's a couple of books that I would identify. One which is more related to business, and one which is more related to fiction. And well, you'll see that goes back to my roots in Scotland. But the first book I would identify is it's called Invention and Reinvention. It's the evolution of San Diego's innovation economy, written by Mary Walshock, who's here at UCSD, and her colleague Abraham Schrag. It's an absolutely fascinating book that basically charts the evolution and re-evolution of San Diego from being, initially a military town to the life science coming here. I mean, I still interact with some of the people that created the very first biotech
Yeah.
company that was ever here in San Diego, which is Hybridtech.
Yeah.
And it's not that long ago. And now to see the hundreds and hundreds of companies here, developing drugs every day is amazing. But that's for people who want to understand San Diego's innovation economy, that's a great book to read. And then from a fiction perspective, my favorite author is Ian Rankin. He's a Scottish crime writer. And he has a character. He's a flawed a policeman called Rebus. Basically, I've been reading the book since he started, and I just finished A Song for the Dark Times, which is his 23rd in the series. And what's nice about it is that Rebus actually grows older through the series.
Yeah.
So you actually feel as though you know him. And sort of grown up with him. So, and that's my favorite author for those that like crime novels.
Great. Well, those sound like good choices. I have a relative moving to San Diego soon in the innovation economy, not on technology, not in life sciences. So I may recommend that first book to him. Sounds like a good one as a
Yeah,
little
absolutely.
gift. Yeah. Well, James Mackay, President and CEO of Aristea Therapeutics and veteran of many other AR and one AZ company. Thank you very much for your time today, and best wishes for continued success.
Thank you very much, David. It's been a pleasure to be with you today.
You've been listening to the Health Biz Podcast with me, David Williams, President of Health Business Group. I conduct in-depth interviews with leaders in healthcare business and policy. If you like what you hear, go ahead and subscribe on your favorite service. While you're at it, go ahead and subscribe on your second and third favorite services as well. There's more good stuff to come, and you won't want to miss an episode. If your organization is seeking strategy consulting services in healthcare, check out our website, healthbusinessgroup.com.